Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Let's set the scene. It's the summer of 2022 and I'm in the thrilling midst of wedding planning with my fiancé Marcus. We'd gotten engaged earlier that year, and our big day was scheduled for June 2023. Now, before I dive into the juicy details, some background is necessary to understand the bizarre behavior that unfolded. For as long as I can remember, my parents, Diane and Richard, have played blatant favorites with my older sister, Tiffany. It wasn't just subtle preferential treatment, it was painfully obvious to anyone with eyes. If Tiffany accused me of something, they'd believe her and punish me without question. But if I dared to make an accusation against her, even with undeniable proof, they'd find a way to scold me while giving her a slap on the wrist. My birthday cakes had to be flavors that Tiffany preferred. Hers? She got whatever she wanted, and my parents would feign ignorance if I disliked the chosen flavor. They consistently bought her more gifts and favored her preferences for family outings and events, even those supposedly centered around me. Tiffany grew up spoiled and constantly used me as her personal punching bag. At first, she mostly ignored me, but as we entered our teenage years, her behavior took a darker turn. I'm not sure if she lost friends or was simply becoming a meaner person, but suddenly, I went from occasional target to her sworn enemy. "Jane is the root of all my problems," she'd screech as our parents nodded along, lapping up her venom like obedient puppies. With their support, Tiffany made it her mission to sabotage any friendships or relationships I attempted to forge. She'd accuse my friends of wrongdoing, leading our parents to forbid me from seeing them. Whenever I managed to snag a boyfriend, she'd inevitably make a play for him, falsely claiming he'd hit on her first. My parents, as dependable as ever, believed her twisted tales and prohibited me from dating those horrible boys. College was my saving grace, an escape from the toxicity shrouding our household. While my parents reluctantly allowed me to attend after I secured a scholarship, they made it clear they expected me to fail spectacularly, a belief fueled by Tiffany's insistence that she, the smarter sister, had dropped out due to the overwhelming difficulty. In a shocking twist, I not only survived, but thrived in this newfound freedom. It was during those halcyon college days that I met Marcus, the love of my life and partner in crime against the forces of parental lunacy. Now, Marcus is a bit of a firebrand. While I tend to internalize and ruminate over injustices, he's the type to clap back swiftly and formulate intricate revenges. When we discussed our impending nuptials, we agreed on a low-key ceremony to allocate more funds for our dream European honeymoon. Of course, my parents demanded to meet this mysterious fiancé of mine. Reluctantly, I agreed, but not before warning Marcus about their antics and Tiffany's penchant for hitting on any romantic partner of mine. Undeterred, he strode into the lion's den with a hidden recorder, eager to catch any shenanigans on tape. What he uncovered, however, surpassed our wildest imaginings. "Babe, you won't believe the insane crap they tried to pull," Marcus exclaimed upon his return, positively giddy with glee. "We can totally screw them over for this." Perplexed, I urged him to explain before listening to the recording. It seemed my parents and Tiffany had proposed a ghastly condition for them to contribute financially to our wedding. Tiffany would walk down the aisle first, donning a full bridal gown. Their rationale? Well, according to them, it simply wasn't acceptable for a younger sister to marry before her elder. Therefore, the only fair solution was for Tiffany to have her own practice walk ahead of me, complete with professional photographs and a ceremonial cake. I'll let Marcus take over from here. "Hey there, vengeance-seeking husband speaking. Now, as much as Samantha paints me as a quick-witted maverick, I'll admit that my brain short-circuited when those kooks proposed that insane idea like it was some grand gift. Even the Trojans would have thought twice about accepting that Grecian present. After a hard reboot, I had an entire catalog of scorching insults prepared to launch, but a devious voice whispered in my soul's ear, "String these fools along." So I told them I needed to consult with Samantha and see how she'd react before storming out, concealing my nefarious plans. Back to me. Marcus recounted this ludicrous scheme with a mischievous grin, the recording solidifying the utter insanity of their demand. While initially shocked that even my parents could stoop so low, Marcus's thirst for payback helped steer me away from despair. We spent hours concocting various revenges, from the ridiculously outlandish to the seemingly feasible. One plan involved providing them with a decoy venue address, only to have Tiffany unceremoniously turned away at the actual location. Thankfully, Marcus's level-headed brother intervened, pointing out the legal risks and logistical challenges of such elaborate ruses. Instead, he suggested a far simpler approach: hire security to deny Tiffany entry, effectively undermining their bizarre scheme. Naturally, that couldn't be the end of our counterplot. Here's where Marcus's brilliance truly shone. He returned to my parents, feigning agreement with their ludicrous condition as a means of preserving family harmony. However, he cautioned that due to my history of being deceived by past boyfriends and my apparent jealousy issues, all fabrications, mind you, any discussions about Tiffany's practice run must remain strictly verbal to avoid alarming me. And so began months of delightfully devious machinations. Rather than pay for our modest ceremony, my doting parents insisted on influencing every aspect, from the venue to the catering. Each time, Marcus would purposefully select the most economical options before secretly arranging for Tiffany to sample the wares. "It's such a shame we can't take advantage of your generosity, but we wouldn't want to seem ungrateful," he'd lament, prompting my parents to insist on upgrading to the premium choices at their expense. The same song and dance unfolded with the photographer, the flowers, even my wedding dress. When my mother attempted to foist an unflattering gown upon me, Marcus deftly intervened, promising to handle the situation. He then confided in Tiffany, suggesting they intentionally damage my desired dress, forcing me to wear the atrocious alternative. Throughout this ruse, any attempts at written communication were swiftly deflected. If Tiffany texted, I'd immediately respond, reinforcing the narrative that I was a controlling, jealous partner who monitored Marcus's devices. My unwitting sister and parents fell for the act hook, line, and sinker, believing the lack of paper trail stemmed from my supposed possessiveness. For the record, being portrayed as some psychotically jealous harpy amused me to no end. I actively encouraged Marcus's unflattering depictions, reveling in the delicious irony. Finally, the big day arrived. The plan called for Tiffany to make her dramatic procession once all guests were seated, allowing no opportunity for interference from me, the bride. Marcus even provided physical proof that he had sabotaged my wedding gown, reinforcing their foolish belief that I'd be forced to settle for the unsightly alternative. However, unbeknownst to them, we had stationed undercover security personnel to intervene. As the ceremony commenced and my bridesmaids processed down the aisle, a Confederate texted me the prearranged signal to make my entrance. I strode in confidently, taking my mark at the opposite end of the aisle from my father, who had been poised to receive me. Spotting me, his expression contorted with shock and confusion as he glanced around, likely searching for Tiffany's imminent arrival. His phone rang. Tiffany, no doubt. And with a mumbled excuse about something coming up, my father abandoned his post, leaving me stranded in front of our stunned guests. What did he mean it wasn't supposed to be me? I feigned distress, my voice quavering ever so slightly. While a part of me had doubted my parents' capacity for such cruelty, their actions stung nonetheless. Marcus's accomplice sprang into action, loudly questioning my father's baffling statement within earshot of the audience. "I'll go check on things," she proclaimed, before scurrying off to locate the security team and forestall any attempts to disrupt the proceedings. With my husband's father swiftly escorting me down the remaining aisle, we commenced with our vows and ceremonial rites, undisturbed by further disruptions. Throughout the evening's festivities, I noticed guests periodically slipping away before returning, no doubt witnessing the unfolding spectacle that we'd masterfully orchestrated. Here's what transpired based on eyewitness accounts. Upon arriving in her audacious bridal garb, Tiffany was denied entry by our security team, who cited strict policies about permitting only one bride per venue. My father attempted to intimidate them, insisting they couldn't possibly be legitimate employees. When the hired guards stood firm, affirming their right to summon police for trespassing violations, the gravity of the situation became apparent. Damage control quickly took precedence over completing their ill-conceived scheme. As word of the unfolding drama spread, a growing crowd of bewildered guests and bystanders assembled, subjecting my parents and Tiffany to a torrent of condemnation for their despicable actions. Desperately, they tried to shift blame onto Marcus, claiming he had been a willing participant in this grotesque plan. This alleged accomplice, however, played dumb with steadfast denial and indignant demands for evidence, which they could not produce. My husband chastised them as terrible parents, reveled in publicly eviscerating their ridiculous lies, and promptly returned to celebrating our newlywed bliss. While the venue staff refused to release security footage at my request, several witnesses had captured portions of the melee on their phones. Watching my parents and Tiffany endure the very public humiliation they'd hoped to inflict upon me, well, it felt like a balanced cosmic scales after a lifetime of injustice. In the days that followed, my estranged family persisted with harassing messages and demands for communication. Unwisely providing a documented paper trail of their unhinged behavior, Marcus systematically compiled these abusive missives and shared them across our extended family's group chat, appealing for assistance in halting their ongoing campaign of torment against us during our honeymoon. The messages have since ceased, though part of Marcus laments depriving himself of opportunities to eviscerate Tiffany further, should she have ignored the family-enforced communications blackout. So, while I'll always lament having to exclude such toxic individuals from one of life's most joyous celebrations, there's a vindictive satisfaction in witnessing their schemes crumble so cinematically. For once, the deceivers were deceived, and the unjustly persecuted emerged triumphant. The next one is an entitled People Story. I've lived in my house for over 20 years now. It's a nice two-story home with a big backyard that I worked hard to afford. The neighborhood was always peaceful and quiet, which is exactly what I wanted. That all changed when my neighbor Bob decided he wanted to do some major construction on his property. Bob moved in about 5 years ago. He was friendly enough, always waving and saying hello, but he was definitely the flashy show-off type. He loved talking about his fancy cars and his big plans to renovate his humble abode, as he called it. I didn't think much of it at the time. What Bob did with his property was his own business. If only I had known then how wrong I was. The nightmare started when Bob hired a huge construction crew to build an addition to his house. We're talking bulldozers, dump trucks, you name it. The noise was unbelievable from sunrise till sunset. I tried talking to Bob about it, but he brushed me off saying it would only last a few weeks. Well, a few weeks turned into a few months. That's not all. The construction caused so much dirt and dust to fly everywhere, coating my house in a layer of grime. It was disgusting. When I confronted Bob again, he claimed his crew would pressure wash my house when they were done. Yeah, right, like I trusted him to do that properly. To make matters worse, the construction was damaging my property. First it was small things like clutter from debris ending up in my yard. Annoying, but I picked it up and threw it out without causing a fuss. But then I noticed cracks forming in the foundation of my house. That definitely caught my attention. When I went to inspect the damage, I saw that several areas of my foundation now had gaping cracks. Furious, I banged on Bob's door and dragged him out to show him what his little project was doing to my property. Bob hardly reacted, shrugging it off like it was no big deal. He even had the gall to say, "Houses settle, it's normal. Normal my foot." My house was pristine before this nonsense. When reasoning with Bob failed miserably, I called my lawyer. I had had enough of this jerk's carelessness. My lawyer drafted a sternly worded letter, stating that Bob's construction activities were directly damaging my property. It demanded that he cease the construction immediately or provide compensation. Of course, Bob didn't stop. If anything, the construction seemed to ramp up just to spite me. That did it. No more Mr. Nice Neighbor. I filed a lawsuit against Bob for the damage his crew caused. The court date came quickly, and Bob showed up clearly annoyed, as if he were wasting his precious time. "Too bad, buddy. You should have thought of that before destroying my property." In court, Bob tried to pin the blame on natural wear and tear, saying it was normal for foundations to shift a bit over time. But I presented the evidence. Photos dating back over 10 years showing the pristine condition of my home before Bob's havoc. The contractor Bob had hired even testified that the foundation damage directly lined up with where they had operated heavy machinery. Boom! No way for Bob to talk his way out of that one. The judge ended up ruling completely in my favor, ordering Bob to pay not only to repair all the foundation damage, but also for the inconvenience his lengthy construction caused. I won't lie, it felt good seeing Bob's mouth hanging open in shock when the amount was announced. I guess he didn't expect this annoying neighbor to fight back and win. The court ruling was honestly the easiest part. Unfortunately, getting Bob to actually pay up was a whole other headache. He tried every trick in the book to stall and avoid paying me a dime. First, he filed an appeal, which failed miserably. Then he claimed his assets were tied up in investments so he couldn't access funds. What a liar. I knew Bob had just bought himself a shiny new luxury car. Luckily, my lawyer was an expert at dealing with deadbeats like Bob. We put a lien on Bob's house, so if he tried to sell or remortgage, he'd have to pay me first. We also garnished his wages and seized that precious car of his. That finally wiped the smug look off Bob's face. Nothing like hitting jerks where it really hurts. Their wallets. It took months of this back and forth, but I finally got every last cent I was owed. The construction mess is all cleaned up now and my house is looking better than ever. As for Bob, he's much quieter these days, rarely even looking my way. I guess he learned the hard way that I wasn't going to be pushed around. The peace and quiet of my neighborhood has been restored thanks to that satisfying court ruling. Don't mess with me or my property. The next one is a petty revenge story. I regularly visit my local dog park with 2 of my dogs. We have a great neighborly relationship with several of the regulars, and it really is a highlight of my day to go to the dog park. I always make a joke that I'm going to just stop bringing the dogs at some point because I think I get more out of it than they do. My local dog park is easy and convenient for me to use, and it's even more convenient because my brother lives in the house that is next to the dog park, with his grassed side yard being directly on the other side of the dog park parking lot. The dog park regularly runs out of parking spots, and there are clear signs on the edge of my brother's yard that say, "No parking on grass vehicles will be towed at owner's expense." Well, due to this little familial perk, I have taken to just parking on his grass because my brother said I'm more than welcome to, and it keeps a spot open for others who may need it. This will be important later. So, about 2 months ago, somebody new decided to begin using the dog park with their 2 Chihuahuas, and they immediately broke 2 rules. First, they didn't leash in the area that is leashes only. Second, they brought their Chihuahuas into the big dog area. I politely told this lady that she needed to take her Chihuahuas out because they were snapping at several dogs, including my hound dog, who is not real smart, so my hound dog wasn't getting the message, and the Chihuahuas were getting really aggressive to the point that one of them tried to bite my dog. She responded by telling me to F off. I left and went over to my brother's house and made sure my dog was okay. He was. This continued for several weeks, her dogs in the big dog area, without leashes from the car to the gated area, but I was a little upset that even after calling the county, no one was holding this woman accountable to the rules. Finally, I decided to just change my schedule. So I staggered my time of going to the dog park, and I started getting there so I could leave when Chihuahua Lady arrived. She came at the same time every day. I did too. It isn't uncommon for people to have specific dog park times, and I was able to avoid most interaction. That is, except for the one I was looking forward to. So one morning I had the boys leashed back up on the way out, and as we were walking to my car, there wasn't any parking available. I saw Chihuahua Lady pulling in. She was looking for a spot, and I said to her, "I guess you can park over on that grass once I leave." She says, "I didn't think that was allowed." I said, "Oh yeah, I park there all the time, just wait for me to pull out and take the spot." She said, "Thanks, wow, I appreciate it." So I pulled out, I saw her pull in right behind me, and I called my brother, who works from home, and let him know that somebody had parked on his grass. I asked him to call up the tow company and have them towed and ask them to come quick. He was a little puzzled as to the reason for the urgency, and I explained the situation and who this was. Well, he calls me back 20 minutes later and says that the car is hooked up to a wrecker and that there is an angry lady screeching at the tow truck driver, telling the tow truck driver that she sees people park there all the time. At this point, my brother went outside and explained that the only car that is ever there is his brother's, and that his brother is the only one allowed to park there, and that he saw her pull in this morning when his brother left, directly behind him. The lady continued to scream, and the tow truck driver said, "If you pay the unhook fee of $300 and the owner agrees to it, you can just move your car." Well, my brother is a nice guy and figured my plan had gone far enough, so he agreed. The lady had to shell out $300 right there in front of him, and the tow truck driver unhooked her and took off. She looked at my brother and said, "Your brother is an a-hole," got her dogs in her car, and drove off. And even though that lady still won't change her ways, at least I got to feel a little better about the situation. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This is the best time that my warnings went unheeded and made the client regret ever asking. I worked in recruitment for 9 years, and a few years back I had a new client, hiring manager, and she didn't like abiding by the rules set up for the recruitment team. For one thing, we review the applicants, interview the best qualified candidates, and then submitted them to the hiring manager for consideration. Well, this hiring manager couldn't understand why we only sent over 3 candidates in a week. Honestly, she's lucky as some positions did not garner that many applicants. I explained that we submit 3 candidates for every 1 position available. This ensures that the hiring manager's time was considered when scheduling next step interviews. This wasn't just a standard I set, it was approved by her company's TA bosses, and frankly was standard at another place I used to work as well. Hiring manager. That is absurd. I want to review all of the candidates so I can tell you whom to pre-screen, and then you schedule their interview with me based on my availability. Me. But ma'am, you have almost 100 applicants that met your minimum qualifications. I don't think you really want to devote that much time to reviewing all of these resumes, and honestly, some of them were not great. Hiring manager. Are you not listening? Send them all over to me and I'll take care of it. Me. Yes, ma'am. You got it. I'll send those over right away. I wrote an email to the hiring manager immediately after the call, restating the topics discussed by phone, and asked, again, if she was certain she wanted all of the candidates sent to her. She confirmed, I complied, and forwarded to my boss with an explanation that she will take care of reviewing all applicants and my numbers were going to be skewed for the month. I did as requested, selecting nearly 100 candidates in the system and moved them to hiring manager review. Now, what this did was send individual emails for each candidate as an update to the hiring manager, and it would ping her email every 3 days that they weren't reviewed. I smirked, knowing what was about to happen, and my rear was going to get chewed out in about a week, but it felt good because I knew I was right. 2 days later, my boss calls and says he got an irritating phone call from this hiring manager who said she never requested this, to which they responded with the information detailed in my email. She was speechless. He let her know that I would go back into the system and back up the candidate process so it would be taken out of her to-do list, and I would continue to send over candidates that were the best fit for the role as described in our processes. I never received pushback from that hiring manager ever again. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.